Okay. In 2018, an Arab lady passing by the Asali and Assali at the Medina temple informs the artists that this building was built by the Arab nobles. In 2001, the social club of the Shriners is mistaken for a Muslim organization, leading to harassment and vandalism after more than a century of full Middle Eastern practices. In 2003, Bloomingdale's opens the Medina Temple. In 2018, Assaley shows Assali an unusual tarbush inside the Bloomingdale's home store. In 2019, the Medina Temple seeks zoning change to become suitable for lifestyle club, businesses, and yoga practices. In 1883, Oriental Hall, the first permanent home of the Medina Temple Shriners, is established at 16 North LaSalle Street, room 122. The first Medina Shrine ceremony is staged, complete with costumes and props. 1889. The Medina Shriners outgrow the Oriental Hall and lease the Egyptian Room of the American Express building. The Egyptian Room boasts lavish ornamentation, featuring Egyptian-themed murals and detailed moldings.
2018. Assaley and Assali title their project The People of Medina, Sheriffs of the Gaze. The year 400. 3 prominent Arab Jewish tribes begin to encroach and inhabit Medina from Yemen. 2019. It is announced that Bloomingdale's will vacate the Medina Temple in the early summer of 2020. The building will be redeveloped. (1906) The Shrine Circus is founded, the first held in Detroit, Michigan, at the Muslim Shrine. 1994 through 1996. The remaining 6 pieces for Disney's Fantasia 2000 are recorded at the Medina Temple Auditorium, including Symphony No. 5 and Carnival. 871. Shriners immigrated to Chicago to establish Medina from Becker's Temple in New York.
2012, Assaley fractures her L1 vertebrae in ballet rehearsal. 1271. After conquering new large swath of land of Andalusia, the people of Alhambra Palace celebrate in the streets, exclaiming, "Ghalib al-Ghalib, victor of victors." Sultan al-Ghalib tells his people, "There is no victor but God." This sentence is engraved on every mosque throughout Spain. In 1903, Medina Shriners purchased their first mosque, the limestone church building at 235 Dearborn Avenue. In 2020, Assaley and Assaley drive from the Schaumburg IKEA to the Bolingbroke IKEA, passing by the current Medina Temple located in Addison, Illinois. The artists find a mosque in the lot next to it. In 1996, Jose Luis Benavides feels uncomfortable while attending the Shriner Circus performance at the Medina Temple.
June 5, 1923, the President of the United States wears a tarbush. He opens the White House in Washington, D.C. to all Shriners. No tickets or invitation are required, only the passport of a Shriner to be a personal guest of the president. 2020. There remains no monuments, buildings, streets, parks, or landmarks in Chicago named after an Arab individual. 1870s. An American is fascinated by an Arabian Nights party in France. He takes copious drawings. Entertainment includes an elaborately staged musical comedy. At its conclusion, the guests become members of a secret society. He shares this experience with other Americans upon returning and discusses building a Mecca in New York City. Around 1879, also in France, a poisonous mind and some oil paints fabricate an image of a naked boy standing on a small carpet in the center of a blue-tiled room with Arabic calligraphy walls. He is holding a snake around his waist and over his shoulder. An older man sits to his right playing a fipple flute. A performance is watched by a motley group of armed men from a variety of Islamic tribes with different clothes and weapons. 2020, Assaley and Assali imagine the future plan and purpose of the Medina Temple.
Between 1991 to 93, Shriners practice hazing rituals as a part of initiating new members. Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat make Bill Clinton happy while they shake hands. Disney announces its a new anthem. Oh, I come from a land, from a faraway place, where the caravan camels roam, where it's flat and immense, and the heat is intense. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. When the winds from the east and the suns from the west, and the sand in the glass is right. Come on down, stop and on by, hop a carpet and fly to another Arabian night. In 1939, the Medina Temple's original gold terracotta domes are removed. In 1954, the Medina Temple's pavilions are topped with a new sheet metal onion-shaped domes. In 1995, the Medina Temple's sheet metal domes are removed. In 2000, the Medina Temple receives two 10,000 pounds copper onion domes on its east-facing pavilions. In 2018, Asali and Assali are fascinated by the Shriner officer positions, particularly by one called Sharif al-Ain, which the artists translate as Sheriff of the Gaze, while Shriners translate this title as the Oriental Guide.
1903. The Medina Temple borrows propaganda texts from the Alhambra in Granada, Spain. There is no victor but God, part of a uniform type of propaganda intended to underline the God-given context for the rulers inhabiting the palace. (2018) Assaley grabs his scissors and cuts a Shriner's mooning butt, a photo of a photo found at the Muslim temple in Southfield, Michigan. Assaley overlaps the butt of the naked boy in the Orientalist French painting with the Shriner's butt, and overlays a blue hookah shaped as a machine gun he found in Dearborn, Michigan, for the armed men sitting on the floor watching the boy. 1892. The Medina Shriners state their purpose for adopting Arab aesthetics is to cloak their organization with a sense of pageantry and mysticism. 1999. The Medina Temple is scheduled for demolition. Chicagoans, many with childhood memories of seeing the annual Shrine Circus or other exhibitions at the Medina Temple, are horrified and send protest letters to Mayor Richard Daley. 2001. the Medina Temple becomes an official city landmark. A year after 9/11, 2001, Mecca Temple, New York announces, "It is not afraid. We're not offending anyone and we will never give up the name Mecca, never," they say. The Mecca Shriners agree, though, that Arabs and Muslims have had bigger issues on their minds.
In 1870, several thousands of Freemasons in Manhattan discuss the idea of a new fraternity for Masons, stressing fun and fellowship. In 2019, the developer who helped save Chicago's Medina Temple nearly 20 years prior buys the landmark and evaluates what's next for it after Bloomingdale's home store departs and leaves it empty. In the year of 622, the Prophet Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina. Medina is Muhammad's destination in his hijrah, migration from Mecca. The constitution of Medina, Dastur al-Medina, was drawn up shortly after his arrival to Medina. In 1912, the Medina Temple in the Medina of Chicago is built. In 1978, Edward Said publishes his book, Orientalism. The painting, The Snake Charmer by French Orientalist painter Jean-Leon Gérôme is put on the cover of Said's book, while Said himself does not mention the painting in his book. Said says, American Orientalism is much more indirect than European Orientalism. It's much more based on abstractions and very politicized by the presence of Israel. In August 2018, Assaley and Assali trespass the gate of the Medina Temple at midnight and take a mold of its text.
1913, Chicago's architectural record misarchives the text of the Medina Temple as saying the Shahada, the Islamic proclamation of faith. Chicago's architectural record goes on to state that the Medina Temple imitates but does not copy Arab design, and that the buildings of the Arabic period are characterized by a lack of organic perfection and are illogical structurally. 1889, Frank Lloyd Wright gifts his 6 children a mural in their playroom based on the Arabian Nights. An Arab fisherman sits on the shore and watches a gold-foiled genie escaping from a jar. 2002, Hussein Abish, communications director for the American Arab Anti-Discriminations Committee, a Washington organization, says, Shriners' practices are certainly not something that causes a great deal of resentment in the community.
In 2008, Assaley, at 12 years old, is cast as the Arabian doll in West Virginia's The Nutcracker. Assaley is given a belly dancing garment to perform a ballet role. Sometime in 20th century, American Orientalists adopt the idea of the Orient, imagined by French and English Orientalists. In 1912, the Medina Temple on Wabash Avenue opens a 4,200-seat auditorium for the ancient Arabic order of the Nobles of the Mystics Shrine. In 2017, while researching the presence of immigrants coming to the US from Greater Syria, Assaley only comes across a community called the Syrian Shriners based in Cincinnati, Ohio.
1911, the Shriners architects Hewell and Schmidt appropriate the Alhambra Palace in Spain to create a colorful Islamic-looking building for their Shriner friends in Chicago. They call it the Medina Temple, replete with pointed domes and an example of Moorish revival architecture. It is acclaimed as an architectural nightmare during this time. 1896, American architect Frank Lloyd Wright holds Oriental-themed parties in his Oak Park home and studio. 2019, Assaley installs the copied tiles and curtains from the Medina Temple in Michigan City, Indiana. Assaley pays for a billboard on the highway between Southfield and Dearborn, Michigan, to out the secret society and release all characters found in the Muslim temple. However, Assaley's billboard is rejected by the advertising agency. (1915), the auditorium receives a 30,000-pound Austin Organ Company pipe organ with 92 ranks, a 5-manual fixed console, and a 4-manual movable console added later in 1931. 2003, Bloomingdale's opens in the Medina Temple.
In June 2019, Bloomingdale's parent company, Macy's, sells the Medina building to Chicago developer Al Friedman. In 1273, Al-Ghalib Billah, the victor by the grace of God, a sultan of Granada in Spain, dies at the age of 77. In 2018, and in order to disrupt the false and repeated tile pattern on the Medina Temple gate and to become counted in piles, Assaley and Assaley buy 36 bags of cement at Home Depot and eat hot dogs. In 1968, Bob Woodfield cruises in his tiny car shaped like a Persian rug during the Al-Quran Temple Shriners Parade in Ohio. He crashes into Williams Fletcher's car and laughs, saying, "Oh boy, well, like a flying carpet." In 2023, the Medina Temple functions as a health, fitness, and lifestyle club.
2016, Assaley and Assaley confuse each other's names, mistaking the other for having the same name as them. Before September 11th, 2001, Palestine Shriners' fezzes are knocked off their heads, especially when members travel outside their home territory. The Palestine Temple changes its name after members receive threatening phone calls and are harassed in public. 2002, Bloomingdale's covers Desert Pilgrimage, a mural of camels, pyramids, tents, and veiled men with silver paint.
And in 2018, Assaley visits the Medina Temple in Chicago's downtown and says, "This is not a mosque. This is not a surah. This is not La ilaha illallah. This is Bloomingdale." Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have, do you want me to open it up for everyone to ask questions?
Sure, yeah.
That'd be great.
Or comments, anything. We're happy to.
I have one question about the city of Chicago's designation, and could you speak about the mistranslation of that, of the words surrounding the Arabic calligraphy surrounding the entrance to the temple, now Bloomingdale's?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to pull up a picture of maybe the date from it? Maybe where I'm working on it. Maybe that one is good.
Yeah, it was a starting point for us, or a point of becoming really obsessed with the misspelling that is happening there. And the misspelling is more complicated than just misspelling of a word, or a letter is wrong, which is literally happening. But what was even more fascinating for us is the idea that it looks like taken from Quran and it's repeated, while usually in Quran you don't repeat the same sentence, you complete the full surah. While this sentence is repeated to create this aesthetically beautiful pattern on their gate outside. But actually to find that it's repeated and it's in Quran, it's taken from, to find later after long research that it's, as we mentioned in the performance or in the reading, it's actually appropriated not from the Middle East, or a Middle Eastern mosque. It's actually appropriated from Alhambra, or like several mosques in Spain, in Andalusia, of this sentence that was repeated in response, said by what his name, Al-Ghalib, who is the Arab leader at that moment, after people they were shouting to him, Ghalib al-Ghalib, Ghalib al-Ghalib, after he expanded the land of Andalusia. So he responded to them being angry. No, don't shout to me. Say, no God, no Ghalib, but only God, because Ghalib is also one of the 99 names for God. So he's saying, no, I'm not the victor, but it's only God. So he's being humble at that moment. And that sentence, there is no God, but only God, there is no victor, but only God, is literally the translation for the misspelled written tiles on the gate. وَلَا غَالِبَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Written in a wrong way, and it looks like La ilaha illallah for most Arabs, that we were asking them, or any Arab, I would show this sentence, oh, it's La ilaha illallah, but it's not. It's a misspelled for Wala ghaliba illallah, that it's not Islamic. It's what do we call that? It's political. It's propaganda to some degree.
So is it misspelled on at the Alhambra as well, or is this a misspelling from the Alhambra?
When they took it from Spain to here, they even misspelled it. If you compare it, it's not identical to the Alhambra ones.
Yeah.
There is no one corrected them to even to type it correctly. But that's what it means. It's coming from there, but it's also misspelled.
Is it misspelled, or is it that it was a design choice that they?
I think it's a design choice, yeah, but that's not an excuse. It is a design choice.
Language, yeah.
I think so.
I have a question. Am I here? Okay, I think I'm here. Yeah, this was really incredible. I was glad I took my nap for this, but I was really interested in the telegraphing of Palestine, the presentation, and the use of it mostly in the printed materials down the Palestine temple, and you mentioned that several times. You mentioned Israel just once, but you used it to refer to the nation of Israel, the modern nation of Israel. Whereas when you use Palestine, you always use it in reference to the appropriation of the name Palestine by the various Shriners. You know, one of these non-question questions, I'm just interested in that, whether it's deliberate or just incidental throughout the archival work that you did. And I'm gonna mute myself.
Yeah, that's a great question, but I would like to ask everyone who is not speaking just to mute while the speaker is speaking. You want to say something about that? I mean, it's different Palestine mentioned,
Right.
the actual Palestine or the Palestine temple, so that confusion is also happening through their translation or appropriation.
Right. Well, one thing that's happening with Shriners is that all chapter names are appropriated, whether from Medina, which becomes Medina, or Mecca Temple in New York, the Syrian Shriners in Cincinnati, and then you have the Palestine Shriners in Rhode Island that ended up changing their name to Rhode Island Shriners to avoid the connotation with Palestine. I think there are many times in the script that we were using Arabic words, but actually referencing an American thing. There's this page that Qais pulled up where we actually found that the Medina Temple hosted a celebration for the Palestinian Declaration of Independence. Yeah, I think I was struck to see that the Medina Temple had an event in solidarity with Palestine. This is in the year 88.
Yeah. But just to add also to that question, it's a great question. Thank you, Elliot, for the question. It's also just thinking of Palestine Temple in, where is it?
Rhode Island. Yeah.
Or Connecticut, I think.
It's Rhode Island.
Somewhere there, around Massachusetts. Okay. The thing is, it's one of the temple Shriners that after 11 September that it was vandalized, and people, they thought that it's actually terrorists and they are actually Palestinians. They are bad people. So I just was fascinated by the idea that now they have to change the name of Palestine and lose the name of that Palestine to protect themselves. So they are not going to be thought or as they are the bad people. So they lost the name. And this was just a fascinating idea of just thinking of the layers that is happening of an appropriated Palestine or whatever name losing its name in this absurd scenario here. So yeah, and another one like Islam Shriner in California changed its name because there is someone, they got harassed in their bus and people thought they are terrorists and they are related to the thing. And it's even worse. They were saying it got really crazy that some people start to call Islam Temple to ask about the times of prayers. So it's really getting crazy. So they have to change the name. People are really thinking that they are Muslims. So that's for me is why we are really interested in the Palestine in particular, and it's not Palestine anymore. Thank God. Yeah. I think it's called the new, the name of the, and that's related to many of them losing the name and changing the name after this kind of, like, it's like, how we call that? Like in Arabic, you make a hole for someone and you fill in it. It's literally, that's what's happened. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I also just struck that it's always Medina Temple or Palestine Temple, not like Medina Mosque, or Medina rather. I'm misspelling it or mispronouncing it. So interesting. Yeah, well, thank you anyway.
Medina talk. Any other questions, comments?
I mean, I have another one if it's, you know, it was interesting switching from the Arabic pronunciations of words, Medina, to the inappropriately, or Medina, or I think Mecca was probably okay, but there was another one, I forget what it was. And was that challenging as an Arabic speaker to encounter like Muslim or what have you? I don't know. Yeah, just in terms of like actually reading the script. I don't know.
What do you think, Amanda?
We practiced to not trip up, but yeah, I think we're also interested in our names being, I guess, would have similar or the same pronunciation in English, but in Arabic are just very slightly different names. So yeah, I think as we are interested in kind of playing with the possibility of confusing the viewer with Medina, where is the setting, what are we talking about? We're also trying to do that with our last names when we're referencing ourselves in the script.
Yeah, this American pronunciation for those terms, like in the same case, thinking of the Muslim or the Muslim, which is even, it can be problematic to some degree, but for me as an Arabic speaking person, hardly speaking English, it's for me, it's just both it's both supposed to be in Arabic, like Muslim is Muslim, not even Muslim or Muslim. So I don't know, I mean, both are not Arabic. I would say Al-Madina, not even Medina in Arabic. So it's, I don't know, it's just layers of translation and how a language with ethical reasons or non-ethical reasons, it's changing the process of what is happening to the terms. For sure, we are those kind of layers of changing belongs to levels of education and belongs to cultures and belongs to how you've been educated to really reach that level of saying Medina, you know, like that's for me relates to levels of you've been educated to those terms from a specific perspective. Or in a self-centered way, I don't know. But we were actually interested in this conversation thinking of, if you remember, Amanda, you were talking about when they say Medina and when they say Muslim, how is that offensive for Arabs? No, it's, do you remember what you were saying about something about
just asserting the American pronunciation it feels like violent to me. Yeah, I
don't know. Yeah, the violent aspect of having that pronunciation. I don't know how other Arabs or people with us would think of that. Like, for sure, we agree it has a kind of weird perception for a Muslim person to hear it as Muslim, and where is that coming from? I wonder, like, to unpack that kind of, I would say, negative aspect, or if we would say offensiveness that's coming from it. Where is that exactly coming from? That's an open question.
I have a question or two. Thank you very much. I grew up a town adjacent to Medina, Illinois, and I did not know this history, so I really appreciate it. When you brought up Said's Orientalism, and that there's a particular American variant of it, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, and maybe even specifically Chicago with the archival research that you did, how this demonstrates an American type Orientalism. And I was also connected to that, interested that the architecture that you focused on wasn't just within the society. I think of Shriners as a kind of semi-Masonic secret, but in fact, this architecture was to bring in many people, to bring in many, mostly Americans, we can say, and have many different types of events, so that it was almost public facing. It was clearly, it was public facing, which I just find wrapping my head around the connection to the society as this particular thing, and the fact that this was actually join the very apparent urban fabric of Chicago, if that makes sense.
Right. That, I think it was really important to me when we were crafting this to bring up Frank Lloyd Wright. I also think with bringing up many events, we wanted to ensure that, I mean, I don't think it's as simple as pointing to the Shriners and saying like, wow, look at these terrible people. I think, yeah, we're trying to kind of untangle how it seeps into like across American architecture, and how Orientalism kind of has pervaded.
I'm thinking of the you mentioned, like, it's a public architecture to some degree. It's a public building to some degree, that it was treated as a circus, later as a ceremony for some universities, right? Like School of the Art Institute of Chicago itself celebrating the ceremony for graduation at some maybe a year or some time. But just thinking of it as a public icon in this iconic architectural city, I would connect that to the idea that we mentioned, this kind of lack of Arab recognition for immigrants or Arab population in the city of Chicago, while it's literally it has for example, like the largest Palestinian population in the United States. This lack of Arab recognition for names of streets or names of a building or names of anything to commemorate for this community in it. Just thinking of those kind of how they deal with each other. Like we talk about the segregation in lands of Chicago, but we don't talk about this kind of full erasure for the presence of a specific identity. But you also talked about the European versus American Orientalism in your first part of the question, and that goes back, just thinking of Edward Said for sure, and it's just interesting for me just to think of where is the base and the foundation of Orientalism in the American mind coming from, where Edward Said is talking about there is this colonial relationship happening between European countries, nations, and the Orient, like this long relationship of like British and India living there, in colonialism, where there is no literal occupation or colonialism of United States in the Middle East, but it's more abstract. It's more based on yeah, that goes to also the first question. It's very related to the first ally, the Israel itself with the United States, and how those connect to each other, thinking of Orientalism and thinking of like literally a factory of Orientalism. The Shriners, they are they are making it concrete. They have a dastur, they have a constitution, they have an absurd ideology, they have books, they have faith based on non-faith, but fun and fraternity and brotherhood and whatever. That is very fully based on nationhood and they are very nation oriented to the United States, but very like mystical in what is the Middle East as the desert and whatever. So those for me is, I mean, that desert thing is also European Orientalism, but just thinking of how it's layers of Orientalism, of appropriation happening, something like what we talk about translation going through layers too. Yeah, so it's very based on politics, but contemporary politics for sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for this. This was really amazing. I particularly liked the way you scrambled the timeline and how that also didn't match up with the images. I thought that was very effective in showing like the disjunctures in space and time that are in the building. I have actually also been researching and writing about this building and would love to talk with you more about it at some point. But I just—
same building?
What?
The same building?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, because I was also struck by the juxtaposition between the Bloomingdale's and the whole feeling of the interior of like the late capitalist retail space style with the outside or like the overall structure of the building. And I just wanted to ask about two things in particular that further complicate the building to me. One is that in researching Islamic revival or like Moorish revival, the architectural styles, both of which like the air quotes need to be there for those terms because there's such a loose collection of things. But that one of the architectural forms that has been built in this style were Ashkenazi synagogues, because it was like a moment, I think it was like from the 1830s up through like World War I. So it was a moment in which like Jewish communities were able to be more public facing and had to decide for the first time like what architectural style a very public synagogue would look like. And so the way they sort of decided to do that is to sort of self-orientalize and like stake this claim in being Eastern and other as sort of like a part of not quite assimilating, but sort of like fitting in through like exaggerating their difference. And so, yeah, so that also complicates the idea of like what this architectural style is, as well as like Orientalism and who is considered like Eastern at what points in time. And then also that there's a rich tradition of Black Shriners who were not allowed, who are, you know, like the Shriners and the Masons are racist groups and sexist that did not allow anyone who is not a white man to join. And so there have been like various discrimination suits that have been filed in the past couple decades. But there's this parallel lineage of Black Shriners that they also have this sort of Middle Eastern theme. And so that also complicates the idea of like what these aesthetics are doing. So I'm just curious if you have thoughts about that.
Wow, so many complicated issues. Yeah, I mean, you are going to the, like you mentioned, self-orientalizing, exaggerating the presence, and thinking of Black Shriners, which like aspects that really complicates the what is happening here. I would say, do you want to say something specific, Amanda? It's just like my thought is very, very, very long. Would love to have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
Thinking of like aspects like, sorry for thinking of, I'm just trying to go to like, thinking of,
There it was. This
is the one. Like for me, this is like, I had a long research while doing, while we are doing this research, and going to find like connections between this appropriation or the Shriners and their connections to the Moorish science. I don't know the full name of it. They have their own kind of churches. They belong to the science Moorish, not Moorish, science Christian churches.
Moorish Science Temple of America.
Yeah, and that has this extreme of exaggerating identity and Orientalist identities that is related to mystical things, but they are not Shriners and specific, and mainly empowered and led by Black community. And just thinking of that aspect, that was fascinating to see for me, to find layers of how that connected to beginnings and foundations of Nation of Islam. How this appropriation of the Orient, the Middle East, in its non-belief appropriation, like they are not interested in the Islam or the actual ideologies coming from the Middle East, but interested in the costumes, and interested in the how do we call it, the style of the mystical thing, all of these aesthetics coming from there, to lead for an actual interest in ideologies and in Islam itself, to how those are actually, I don't have a full search, and I'm worried that it's very coming from my connections and looking and being actually start to be afraid of where is this opening as a new research in itself. How that led to this aspect of Nation of Islam, and how that makes us think of Nation of Islam to some degree. So I stopped myself there, but I'm interested in talking more about that aspect. Yeah. You also mentioned, I don't know, Amanda, if you want to say something about that, but Leah, right? That's your name. Leah also mentioned something about the membership to become a Shriner, and the kind of racism of who enters to be able to be a Shriner. There is issues of like, I heard something that at the beginning of Shriners, you can't be from an enslaved roots, that you can't be, if you coming from, if the person coming from any kind of enslaved identities, they can't be a member of Shriners, but they can participate in a different way, not being in the secret parts of the Shriners. That includes, even weirdly, I heard about story of Jewish person who can't be as a part of because of historical reasons. And black facing, thinking of acts they used to do of black facing themselves in their parades, as images we showed here. Sorry, it's so many ideas, and the question is heavy. Any more last comment, last ideas? Or if you want to add something, Meta.
There's one question in the chat about your future. So I think the last question that Leah raised is pointing maybe to some directions, but where, one other question was, are you planning to extend the exploration of ancient writings or mistranslation, or are you interested in working more on these roots of this mistranslation or misuse from the Freemasons to the Nation of Islam and Shriners? Where do you see your direction moving forward, or is there a direction to work with this material again?
This process was really inspiring for us, because it really helped us to, we had so many things and so many in the research that wasn't really embodied in the sculpture, and just the heaviness of the subject matter we are dealing with. So the future, or there is something about, for me, and I think for us, we became really interested in this translation and language aspect of what is happening. It's a cheesy term, but we are dealing with history and a misrepresentation and misappropriation and mistranslation happening. Became interested in this, maybe it might sound cheesy, but rewriting history, as cheesy it can be, reordering history, reconfused, redisrupt history, and retelling what is important, what is not important, and to become a part of the history. And the rephrasing of what is subjective when you create a sentence or a fact, what is subjective and what is not subjective. And I became interested in what we assume is subjective is actually not subjective, but belongs to specific, or what is objective sometimes is not really objective, but belongs to specific way of looking. As an example for that, talking about the painter who painted, the French painter who painted the naked boy, Arab boy, that it's on the cover of the Orientalism book by Edward Said. It was important for me I don't want to really recognize that painter. It's just a mind with some oil fabricated an image. I don't want to help the art history of reproduce his name. So we became really interested in retelling from our own voice, not the typical voice, not what is expected, how you tell specific sentence or a fact.
I think this performance really gave us an opportunity to reinvigorate this work of ours. Qais and I have been working on the sculptural work installation that first was at 6018 North for 2 years. And yeah, it just excited me in a really new and fresh way that, I think, as Qais said, there were so many moments that in the research that became really important to how we made decisions in the sculpture, but really didn't get a chance to speak for themselves or be actors in the work. And so I was really excited with this performance as a chance to like introduce all the actors of kind of the story of this building. Yeah.
Yeah. And just thinking of like, I found myself stop myself because every time I'm moving to a new state and finding myself become really obsessed with the new practices I find of the new Shriners in other states. And like this full obsession that I had in Michigan while being there with a Muslim temple there, that is the architecture of it, as we are talking about architecture, it's like a tent. And we worked on a parade and thinking of the big, huge Arab community and what it means to have these communities of the Muslim temple and the Muslim community in Dearborn. This aspect of every time finding new layers, where is this going to? And but at the same time, I found myself, I want to stop myself, and maybe that's it. With the Shriners, like how important I'm going to treat them as important if maybe we should not, or how to bring something new of these practices. But I'm saying this because they are a huge, heavy subject matter or fact within this country, and it's all map from east to west. They are everywhere. It's like there is so much, and there is big lack of talking about them in literature or someone really identifying what they are doing. Like I don't see literature talking about this appropriation. That is just old-fashioned as even before, like it's very old-fashioned Orientalism. That we are seeing it in 2020. We are not in 1902. Just like from that time, it belongs to that time. And that's really complicated when we say Islamophobia, and we are looking at Islamophobia literally juxtaposed with an old-fashioned Orientalism happening at the same time. Still, tarbouch, still these acts of Persian carpets and old men and deserts and painted now and representing Arabs in this specific way. So it's not layers that happened later that influenced Islamophobia. That no, it's actually happening together. So for me, those aspects are really interesting, and just thinking of how heavy is that, and the lack of people talking about them. Thank you for a question.
Thank you very much. We're at, this has been extremely fascinating, so thank you very much. I'm sure we could go on forever, but it is 2:04, and so we should let people leave if they need to, and if anyone wants to ask another question, they're welcome to ask, but we'll turn the recording off right now.
And I will stop.
So, thank you so much for an amazing, amazing day of really looking into this, even from my own beginning it by